Welcome to our today's episode of the Black American Orthodox Experience, an outreach program of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America in conjunction with the Orthodox Christian Network for the purpose of evangelism. Today we have Mrs. Judith, who is a well-known Orthodox Christian among the Black community here in America. Judith, say hello to our audience.
Hello, everyone, and it's really a pleasure and a blessing to be with you today.
Please tell us a bit about your background. How have your experiences of life, spiritually and otherwise, led you up to this extent?
Okay. My name is Judith Scott. I'm the oldest of three girls. My father, Ulysses Scott, grew up in South Carolina and moved north when he was a young man. My mother was born in New York City. Her family was from the Caribbean, St. Christopher and St. Eustatius. And I was brought up in the Bronx. My father was a tailor and a dry cleaner. My mother was a homekeeper. She was our mother and took care of our home. And we went to an Episcopal church in the Bronx called St. Luke's, which was largely West Indian, and it was a Black congregation. I loved church. I loved going to school, and I played the violin. When I was in high school, I went to a special school called the High School of Music and Art, and that was in Manhattan. So I always was living with families from all different backgrounds and all different languages and religions and experiences. And then my church gave me a really deep sense of God, of faith, and what that was. And my family was an amazing family of love and support and kindness. And so growing up as an African-American, growing up as knowing that I was a person who came from good people, that I had an important future ahead of me, that my future included not only my own success, but an understanding of the people around me. All of that was part of my growing up. I went to Barnard College, which was part of Columbia University. It was the women's school of Columbia University. And so when I was at Barnard, there was a program at Columbia called Double Discovery. We lived on campus in the summertime with high school students who lived in difficult neighborhoods or poor neighborhoods in New York City. Most of them were Black and Hispanic, and they lived on campus with us. That was a great, great, great experience. We learned as much from them about what it was like growing up in the city in difficult situations as they learned from us about what it was to be in school, to be in college, and to read. And the big thing was community. We lived together, and when we built a community with the Columbia students and all these high school kids. I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I knew that from very early on because I really loved school, and I myself loved learning, and I loved sharing what I learned. One day there was one experience. I was around at Columbia, and there was a lot of, this was in the 60s, the late 60s. And so there was a lot of activism in a lot of different spaces. So one day, I was on campus, and a young man who was a Black man was arguing with this student who was a white student. And they were having a discussion that became very heated. And it became clear that the college student was very articulate. He was able to just speak rings around this other young man, this Black student, and just out-talk him. He wasn't right. He wasn't smarter. He wasn't better than this man. But the young Black man was just overwhelmed. Understanding who he was, understanding what he wanted to say, but not being able to really put it into words, not being able to be really comfortable and secure and confident. And I said to myself, well, there's a really big lesson here. One is that young people, all young people, part of schooling and learning in community is building an understanding of who you are, confidence in who you are, an ability to connect and to say that to other people, to listen to people, to not be overwhelmed, to be able to have the confidence that you can listen, you can hear, you could learn, but you could also express yourself. And it was important to think about who I was, what I felt, what I understood in community, and what that meant. You know, if I believed in peace, which I did, if I believed that the United States was an important country that should not be fighting the way it was in a very poor country. So many people, young people I knew, going off to war, dying. Many of them Black people who we were fighting back here to be recognized and for equality and for recognition. And then being a woman in all of this was still in the days when women couldn't have a credit card, right? It was all of these ways blossoming into understanding who I was. And if I was going to fulfill the richness of being one of God's children, then it was important to be present. So I started teaching in high school. And the first school I taught in, I went to Teachers College at Columbia University, and I was on a special fellowship started by Robert F. Kennedy, who was the senator of New York at that time. Teachers College was directly across town from a school called Benjamin Franklin High School, which was in East Harlem. It was 100% Black and Hispanic. They would have like 10 or 8 graduates a year, even though there were hundreds and hundreds of students in the school. The students were amazing, especially the students who were able to come to school every day and be there. But East Harlem, most of the students were from East Harlem and the South Bronx. Both neighborhoods were under tremendous stress and trauma. This was the time of the drug wars. King heroin is what they talked about. It was the time of the South Bronx burning. Burning because the real estate values of the homes that people had were very low. New York City was in a great financial crisis. And the landlords figured out that it was easier to collect insurance on a burned out building than it was to provide services for the homes to be brought up to standards for people to live in. A lot of the kids were what they call lost to the streets, you know, youth crime, youth violence, a lot of drugs. And yet there was amazing hope and vitality there. There was a lot that people of goodwill could learn from and to be there. So I was in Benjamin Franklin High School, then I went to another high school, which was a big comprehensive high school in the middle class area that had Black, white, Hispanic, Jewish, Arab, Korean, Vietnamese. There were students from many, many, many different backgrounds. It was the football team, the students spoke 39 different languages, if you can imagine that. But I learned there that even in a place that was a really fine place, really good neighborhoods, really supportive families, there's still people who have troubles. There's nowhere that you go that's perfect. And there is a need for people of goodwill to be there, to hear the students, hear the families, and to be there for them. And at the same time, it was clear working at Franklin that people in the neighborhoods were dealing with forces beyond their control.
It's obvious you spent many years as a public school teacher. tell us precisely about your spiritual journey, which eventually led you to be an Orthodox Christian.
Well, okay, so I grew up Episcopalian, and then in the 60s when I was in college, I did not go to church. I was busy in that movement and the other movement, and all these things. Church did not speak to me. But when I started teaching, and after I told you that middle-class college, high school, I went to another high school for students who had dropped out or been pushed out of their other schools. And this was a great opportunity. I was the head of that school. It was small and students were dying. They were being shot in the streets. Parents were dying of AIDS. I went to so many funerals. They knew deeply all about mourning and funeral rites and community rites because there was so much death happening. And I went back to church. I went back to church for myself because I needed a strong spiritual place. I needed a way to find meaning and hope and understand that and to be able to live and to bring that to my kids. Because a lot of the students, they sometimes I'd even ask, is there any reason for hope, right? I went to St. John the Divine because I was living in Manhattan and it was nearby. And here were women priests for the first time. And I was part of the healing ministry at the cathedral. I took chaplaincy courses. I was very active. And some of the clergy there suggested to me that I would be good as a clergy person as well. That didn't work out for reasons I still don't really understand, but it didn't. So I came to Union Theological Seminary. What I learned there more than anything was that my understanding of the world as a spiritual place, as a living space where you can find God's creation, understanding. If you're in a home, the home is how people love each other and how God is present. God is allowed to be present, no matter what that home looks like, no matter what the people look like. Wherever you are, bringing that message and holding that message strengthens the community and brings people together. I started taking courses with Father John Anthony McGuckin, who is an Orthodox scholar and historian. And it just opened my eyes, understanding that, yeah, Christianity is from Africa. You know, we've been told, because in my growing up, there was Martin Luther King, who we loved and revered. There was also Malcolm X, who I had great, and Malcolm X was asking us, how could you worship a white God? How could you worship a God that was brought to you with white people? They don't, I didn't feel that way. But from being in an American church, you could really feel that way. The churches that I grew up in was all Black. It was fabulous, but it was all Black because they weren't integrated, even here in New York. So here I was at Union, and I went to an exhibition, and it was about the Black Madonna. And the artists were saying, well, it's ISIS. So I went into Father McGuckin's class, and I was to do a project. I said, can I do a project about the Black Madonna if it's ISIS? He said, of course, the Black Madonna has African roots. Of course you could do that. And I was amazed and thrilled. The church fathers, the Nubian church, the presence of all kinds of people in Palestine at the time, in Antioch and Alexandria. It's the first time I understood, yes, this is completely part of our history and heritage as well. It was just an amazing thing, as well as the sacramental value, sacramental understanding. The church is not just another meeting, with an agenda. It's about God's presence. It's about the Eucharist and God's presence in the Eucharist. Music brings spirituality, art brings spirituality, but within the Orthodox tradition and learning, you understand how and what that means. And then, of course, there was the Theotokos, which I mean, I never had any experience of that. I mean, in Black churches and in Protestantism.
So all this put together,
Yeah,
helped your conversion into Orthodoxy.
that's right. And then Father McGuckin was also my spiritual advisor. And so after taking all these classes with him and learning so much, I said, well, how do I become Orthodox? He said, well, you speak to your priest, who was him, because he had, yeah. And we spoke and read the Psalms, and I had been attending church, and I was received into the church. I was chrismated in 2009. That's how I came to Orthodoxy.
In your explanation, you mentioned that Christianity is from Africa. You must have some awareness of the contributions of the African saints in Orthodoxy.
Yes, yes, yes.
So this awareness, how has that brought growth to your faith? And how do you think it will help in the evangelism and outreach?
So, well, first of all, in Protestantism, Episcopalian is a little different because we recognize saints in Episcopalian. But in American Protestantism and in the Black Church, saints are not a big part of it, really. So, you know, we knew that there was St. Peter. I knew about Martin of Porres, but it's not like Catholicism where there are a lot of saints. So when I came to Orthodoxy, I learned all about the Black saints, right? But the most important part about learning about the African presence in Orthodoxy and Christianity was meeting the people in the fellowship of St. Moses the Black. That was really important. Also, the iconography that was found in Egypt, in Nubia, in Russia, the Black Madonna, and understanding that, yeah, there was an African presence. But meeting the fellowship of St. Moses the Black was really, and still is really important, because they were people who shared an African experience in the United States. You know, we had to know that what these different people out here in official positions were telling us about ourselves was not true. You face people who will insult you or underestimate you or stereotype you or prejudice and all like that. And we could live in fullness because we knew, well, that's not God's view of us. That's not true. So you're always like, you know, you're part of the United States, of course. I mean, I was Ivy League educated and I did all of that, but you're also a step away from it because you had your own understanding of what was going on. And you knew that the United States was very powerful, yes, and but you also knew that there was a violent history and still a present day violence in the way things are set up.
We know you occupy a top leading position in the Axia Women group.
Yes, I met Patricia Buteneff and her husband, Peter Buteneff. Peter is a well-known scholar, and he's a professor at St. Vladimir's.
Yeah, he taught me in St. Vladimir. He was my professor.
Oh, he's a real teacher. He's got real heart. You cannot teach people unless you are in relationship with them. And that I learned from all our teaching. You can't teach anybody if you don't respect them and listen to them and you respect them and they respect you. See, more than a stumbling block being a Black in Orthodoxy was being a woman. I have to be very honest about that because I had been training and I wanted to be clergy. So it was a big step for me. I was in a big argument. Sister Catherine was there and we were going back and forth and back and forth. He's talking about men and I'm talking about the same way each of the priests there talked about how there was someone who recognized in them the spirit that would help them become and serve people at the altar. Somebody who had that talent, that blessing. And I said, but girls have that too. And if in the church we don't see the girls, we're not looking at the girls, then what happens? We all carry the image of God. Women at home, our traditional roles are feeding and caring for and raising good people. And those are the qualities of a good priest, so we had a terrific going back and forth. And Nun Catherine was so great because she was really quiet, and she would say, well, it is important for her because she'll be giving up a call that she understands comes from God. So after that, like the last year and years after, that young priest and I became really good friends. We really learned a lot from each other. He said, I really heard you, my understanding of, girls. I mean, it does, So, so Patricia and other friends of hers as women were saying, we feel very Orthodox as well. We really do feel God and God's presence. And there was a conference at St. Vladimir's on women in Orthodoxy. And all these women were there. And I'll never forget one woman in particular said, I love Orthodoxy. I love it with all my heart and soul. And I'm a woman, and I love being a woman as well. I love what that brings. And it hurts me physically to have to split myself in this way, to have to be fully a woman and yet be blocked off, be not able to, even be at the altar. So Patricia Butonev and St. Phoebe Society, and at this conference, met many, many women who were saying, we love Orthodoxy, we love being women, so we want to see to it. Maybe even if it's not for us, it might be for our daughters and our granddaughters, that the Orthodox Church sees us as women and fully Orthodox. So Patricia started a group of women, and she started small. It was really great. She asked us all to help build an organization by Orthodox women, for Orthodox women, and about Orthodox women. And the first thing that they did before it even started was they did a survey in Orthodox parishes across the nation of what women were actually doing in the church. Well, because you're very active in the church, and women do all kinds of things in the Orthodox Church. There are women in the choir. There are women who help with liturgy. There are women who work in the offices. There are women scholars, many Orthodox women scholars who do that. All the Matushkas who are there every week. And, the reason they want priests to be married is that the role women play are incredibly important to the congregation. They run Sunday school. So with all that in hand, as it's grown, I'm so proud. It's such a great organization. You could look on their website, axiawomen.com, and they have blogs every week where women speak about their role and themselves as Orthodox women. We have a site of women saints. She has a section called Women of the Week, where we talk to Orthodox women who are in all kinds of things, art, music, just very talented, very wonderful. So that's Axia Women.
What do you think our audience should know in their search and discernment towards the Orthodox faith?
There is a deep resonance of the African American experience and the Orthodox liturgy and understanding of what life is about. In America, traditional white American Protestantism, it's a triumphal thing, right? It's a triumphal thing, and life is good and life is happy, and that's what it is. Well, in the Black church, we're happy to be alive, but we also know the whole thing of joyful sorrow, that we could be joyful with our families. We could be joyful in our worship. But around us is deep trouble and trauma and sadness, and we could give way to that. The Orthodox Church also recognizes a joyful sorrow. I read the prayer of Saint Teresa that Jesus has no body on earth now. He doesn't have a body. We're the body. Mm-hmm. We have to look out with compassion. We have to speak the words of grace. We have to use our hands to build things, right? We have to use our feet to travel, right? And that is very much an Orthodox thing, that the Jesus prayer, putting yourself in God's hands. It's a place of inviting Jesus into your life. It's about asking for mercy. And I wrote a piece about that growing up in the United States in a Black family, we hear, Lord, have mercy all the time. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, and it's said when people are really sad, Lord, have mercy. It's happy when people are happy. Lord, have mercy. It's happy when people are surprised. Lord, have mercy, right? And here's the Jesus prayer, Lord, have mercy. Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy, have mercy. And understanding, first of all, that God is there, which is why you call Lord, have mercy. And understanding that mercy is something we all need. We need mercy. We need mercy to keep us, to help us keep God in sight, to keep our spirit strong, to keep us attentive to other people, to keep us able to hear God's voice and confront those things that are all around us all the time that want us to pull us away, right? So this Lord have mercy in the Jesus prayer speaks so much to that. The idea of martyrs, and people could lose their lives because they're confronting evil or they're confronting sins. And so when people die as Christians, when people die because they are living a life, but a system is coming down on them unjustly. And when Jesus died on the cross, we saw what the system does to people who are trying to bring goodness and God and all of that. But then when he destroyed death, we understood, okay, this crucifixion is not the last word. It's destroying death after that. And what do we do when we see the martyrs? We see their strength. We see how people learn from that. And then it's not exactly the same, but it is. When you see people like George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, you see the young man who was the violinist, the young man that the police killed. But when the whole world saw what was happening, and the whole world saw that life for Black people in the United States is not always, there's a lot of systematic things that we face. And people understood it. When I was part of the Orthodox Church, there were people from all over Eastern Europe. And there was total understanding because they'd been taught about America and Black people. And so they saw me as a person and they understood, oh, there are things that you have to fight for as Black people. We understand that and we are allies for you. And they themselves, Eastern Europeans, totally understand how there are governments and regimes and stuff that have, oppressed them, right? They understand that. So they understand how the church has to be a source for good. I want to show you an icon. Do you have a minute? I met an icon writer.
Wonderful.
She's from Bulgaria, and she wanted to do an icon of Jesus Emmanuel as a young boy, right? And she made this icon, and she realized after it was done that the models for it there were two Ethiopian twins, an Ethiopian family. And she realized after she did it that that was the model for her in her mind. So what better story about unity, right? This to me is what Orthodoxy is all about.
Beautiful.
It's about unity, it's about beauty.
Yeah.
It's about Christ, it's about all of it.
It was nice having you in our program. Thank you so much. Okay, have a beautiful days ahead.
Bye.
Bye-bye.